There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camel, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did continually. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now there was a day when the sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And there came a messenger to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them. And the Sabeans fell upon them and took them and struck them down, the servants, with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, there came another and said, "The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house. And it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you." Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, "Naked I have come from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return." The Lord, I'm getting choked up just reading this. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And in all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. He still holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason." Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Skin for skin. All that a man has, he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself when he sat in the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." But he said to her, You speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that came upon him, they each came from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They made an appointment together to come to show him sympathy and comfort him. And when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him. And they raised their voices and wept. And they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads towards heaven. And they sat with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights. And no one spoke a word to him, for they saw his suffering was very great. And that ends chapter 2.
Yeah.
All right. So the format, I think, will be just to kind of talk through each part, but we can talk about anything. But we'll just sort of use that as a way to kind of talk through the text here. So let's just go ahead and start with 1 verse 1. So there's a man in the land of Uz. As far as I know, like Uz it's somewhere in Mesopotamia, and there's some people that claim they know where it is exactly. There's other people that claim that you can't know where it is. It's just somewhere around there. But so we're introduced as Job as a blameless and upright one who feared God and turned away from evil.
Yeah.
And like with everything in these first 2 chapters, like it's so like dense. Like every single sentence has like a bunch of stuff in it. So blameless and upright, kind of, I looked up the Hebrew words and pulled out other definitions. So blameless can mean complete, pious, gentle, and then the upright can means like straight and right. So there's a sense in which Job is both right and complete. He's as complete of a man as there was.
Yeah, and the straight thing, the straight thing is reminds me of, like, I often think about we've talked about this privately, but this idea of laying something straight, it's talking about what is, right? When something is laid out straight, or if somebody is straight, they see things as they are, right? Like that quote from George MacDonald. And that's obvious when at the end of the chapter, Job says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Like, that's somebody who sees things for what they are, right? And he doesn't get caught up in whether or not they're right. They just are. I think that speaks to, like, that's my definition of someone who's upright. Blameless is horizontal. It's the interaction between you and your fellow man.
Yeah, so like the blameless is the horizontal, upright, like a vertical dimension.
Yeah, just by nature of the word, even upright.
Yeah, upright. The next line, the one who fears God and turns away from evil, like that's like we saw that in Job 28.
Right. That's what I
that's
thought.
like what, and it's common in like Ecclesiastes, in the Proverbs, probably in the Psalms. I don't know, but it's that common pairing of like, fear God, turn away from evil. That's like what the wise man in Ecclesiastes, that's like his conclusion of,
but at the
of
same
all his
time,
inquiry.
I like to point out that it's not something you can do. Like the word fear there is actually awe, right?
Yeah, at least in Job 28. Let me look real fast. Well,
because it's usually in that context, it's usually an awe.
Yeah, it's reverence.
Right.
And, yep.
So, like I pointed this out before, but the awe response is not something that you can make happen.
Right.
Right. Like the goosebumps and the hair standing on end and all that stuff. That's a response to something. It happens to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the departing from evil is also not something that you do, but it naturally follows the awe. And so, I think a lot of people get hung up on the doing of the thing, especially Christians, right? So it's like, well, I have to fear God and I have to depart from evil. But what these wisdom texts are talking about is what is, right? It sees things as they are. And you don't get the departing from evil without the awe. The awe happens first. It happens to you. And the departing from evil follows that experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And in Job 28, it says, understanding is departing from evil. Like your ability, or the proof that you understand something is that you avoid evil.
Yeah. And this is like the shorthand version of that. Right? It's just, it doesn't include wisdom and it doesn't include understanding. But those are the two things that happen to you, right? So the awe of God is the gift of wisdom, right? That's the gift that follows. And then the understanding comes, that's what provokes the departing from evil, because you have an understanding, right? So suddenly the doing evil doesn't hold any, like it becomes meaningless to you. It doesn't mean anything. It's stupid, literally. It's just dumb.
Yeah.
Why bother?
Yeah. You see through it. You see it for as it is.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a progression, right? Which I see this over and over again in the scriptures of this. It's talking about transformation. And that's what transformation looks like. It's a progression of events, right? Which is a metanoia, right? An evolution of your consciousness, or I would say a revolution of your consciousness, because metanoia literally is, right? It's a turning. And so I don't know. I just like to, I like to hammer home, and I know that there will be some people that don't like to hear this, but hammer home the fact that we can't do we can't make ourselves change. Jesus calls it being born again. What did we do to be born? Nothing. Right? We did nothing. We had to turn. So we were head first, Think of a metanoia. Turning. and then everything else happened to us. Right.
Yeah. And is it interesting? This is like the first verse, and this seems to be the theme of the whole book.
Yeah.
Okay. So verse 2, there was born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. So we have some interesting numbers here. But 7, 3, and then the sum of them 10 are all numbers of completion.
Oh, interesting.
And so let's see.
It's also got 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels.
Right.
Just
So 7 corresponds with the 7 days of creation and the completion of a cycle. So the whole cycle has been complete in the number 7. It includes the Sabbath, which is like the day of rest and celebration of the work that has been done. Okay, so then 3 is harmony, balance, and the synthesis of opposites.
Which is, yeah, okay, go ahead. I won't.
So you have like 1, which is like one wholeness. 1, you have 2, which is duality and opposites, and then 3 is like the synthesis of those. So within 3, you have 2 and 1. And then 10, I have written 10 is the completion of something made of many parts. So 10 will be like
unit.
Yeah, it'll be like this. It's almost like the, it's, you can see all the parts, you can name all the parts possibly, but it has its own unity in itself.
Yeah.
So really like, so we meet Job, blameless, upright, fears God, turns away from evil, and then his family also has this completeness to it, in just those numbers that it gave, really.
Yeah.
He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys. You have some of these same numbers again, and very many servants. So he's the greatest man of the East.
500 is 10, right? 5 and 5 is 10.
7
and 3 is 10.
And it adds up to 11,500 animals, but I don't know what that means.
I'm just thinking, oh my God, can you imagine feeding all them and managing them all?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this for a second, because, okay, so 7,000 sheep, I have that, like, what would it provide? Like, that's providing a lot of meat and wool to
like
all the people around. Like, how many people is that feeding?
Well, that's like
providing clothing for and textiles. And
I mean, if you have a flock of 500 sheep, you have a big, like a major deal going on, right? Because they double in the spring.
Oh,
okay. Like, people don't keep flocks of sheep. They're not males and females. They're almost always females, because and then you have a few males, right, to reproduce. So if he had 7,000 sheep, then he would have 14,000 in spring. and that's going to feed a country in those days.
Right.
Population that could feed the whole country, I'm sure. But there's no way Job's eating all that.
No. And it's not just him and his servants and his family, even if he has a great number of servants. Like, he's providing stuff for, like the country.
And camels are beasts of burden. That's mostly all they're used for. So that's trading, right?
Yeah. And it's not just trading. It's like the longest and toughest trade routes in the world were all traveled by only camels. And so, like, it was the equivalent of like a semi truck or even like a jumbo jet to make those types of trips. You would have to have camels, and to have 3,000 camels, that means the trade routes are constantly going. Yeah. Like, it's not like he has 10 camels and they go out and come back every year. It's like he has groups of camels constantly going to and fro all these far-reaching locations. So this is, Job is basically, not only is he, feeding the country and possibly like clothing the country with all that wool, he's also engaged in sort of worldwide trade. And then the 500 yoke of oxen, it's all agriculture.
That's
and I don't know how many fields 500 yoke plows, but it's got to be.
Well, it's got a sheep to feed.
Yeah, but even so, like, he's planting
and
thousands of acres.
Yeah,
and the oxen are used for plowing. They're used for harvest. They're used for threshing the grain.
Yeah.
And then the 500 female donkeys, like that's for transportation. So like his servants, that'd be the equivalent of the company car.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, like the fact that it mentions them as females. You could also think of him as a car producer because he's probably breeding them and selling them, right? So he's selling cars to people. He's a used car salesman.
A new car salesman.
New car salesman.
All right. So he's kind of like Ford. He's also involved in global trade. He's also involved. He's Tyson and Fruit of the Loom. And he's also John Deere and Monsanto.
No.
Well, not Monsanto, but I don't know. He's a giant agricultural conglomerate as well.
Yep.
Well, and I was thinking of this about
textile magnate, right?
Yeah.
With the wool. And I mean, the wool from those sheep is a textile industry in and of itself, right? All that fiber has to be processed and dyed and woven and made into clothing and
yeah.
Well,
that's one of the things is like, and then like all that stuff that the camels are bringing in and all the stuff that he's trading out, like that's a whole import export business that's bringing in all these goods from around the world. Mm-hmm. And then there's got to be stores or marketplaces and people to buy and sell the stuff. He's got to have each one of these animals. It's not just saying like, oh, he's just got a lot of animals. It implies like a whole sort of,
it's an absurd number of animals actually.
Right. But it implies like all this economic activity and this vibrancy to the country that he's living in and what he's doing. And he's not just like he's a successful shepherd. He's like a successful shepherd and a trader and a farmer. And also he breeds donkeys and, his servants aren't hoofing around on foot from thing to thing. They're riding a donkey, must mean they're really efficient. And this is like a good operation to be working for. It seems like. Okay. So Job was.
I would be curious. Sorry for interrupting.
No, go ahead.
I would be curious as to if there are any estimates of the population of Mesopotamia in, let's say, Abraham's time, because we don't know how old this book is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, to me, I can't imagine a family needing all that, right? Like this is this is a country. Like this is almost like a country being run. Yep. Right?
Because, he's almost like a king.
Yeah. And yeah, okay. Yeah. I just wanted to say that.
And then the next line is Job was the greatest of the people of the East. So he was like the greatest man, like no one's comparing to him. All right. So now we get into this vision of heaven, or at least the divine council. So verse 6.
What about the sons and having the feast every day?
Oh.
Yeah.
I just skipped right past that.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. So, and his sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite the three sisters to eat and drink with them.
On his day, is that birthday?
That's a birthday. And this is another one, like these sentences are so dense. So this is the only celebration we're told about. And so the birthday is the day that you were created. Essentially, they're celebrating all of creation, sort of in their birthday celebrations. It's a celebration of creation and being and life.
Yeah.
And the fact that the sisters are invited, meaning that they weren't engaging in debauchery. It wasn't an excuse for excessive drinking and,
A bachelor party.
Of what?
It wasn't a bachelor party?
No. I think it wants to show that it was an authentic celebration. Yes. It wasn't like an excuse to do something different.
It was a formal way of celebrating someone's birth into the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just an excuse to engage in senseless whatever partying.
Yeah,
they were actually celebrating their birth.
Yeah, like whoever wrote it is making it obvious that it was a legitimate reason to celebrate, right?
Yep.
That's what it is. Yeah.
And another thing to note is that each one of them had their own house, or at least their own tent or estate or something. So they're all grown at this point.
Mm-hmm.
They're established in some sense. Okay. So when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. Okay, so the days of the feast. So these are multiple day long celebrations, which wasn't rare to have these types of celebrations that would last for multiple days. So this celebration of birthday, celebration of creation would happen. And then after these, Job would kind of gather everyone together and consecrate them. So like the image I have in my mind is they would kind of put away all the fancy clothes, all the celebratory trappings that would go along with a feast, the authentic celebration of being and life. And then they would, I would imagine they would like dress all in white or something, like just plain white. And then they would go and they would like kneel down, and Job would like anoint their head with oil. Like after they've cleaned themselves up, they would wash themselves, they would dress in white, and Job would anoint them with oil. And then he would offer these burnt offerings.
Well, do you think that they had to be there when he did that? Or could he just do that for them?
He said he would, well, it says he would consecrate them. And so I think in the consecration, they were actually part of,
what does it mean when it says Job would send and consecrate them? What does that mean?
I don't know. Let me look up consecrate and see what.
Look up send. What is that word?
He would send away for.
Send for them.
Yeah.
Oh, so you would have to come. They would have to be there.
This is interesting because this is it's the stretching out of the hand to have them brought to him.
Mm-hmm.
And we see the opposite of that where Satan is saying to God, and then God tells Satan to stretch out your hand and afflict Job. So that's the right and left hand, I think. The left hand is the one afflicting and sending away. And then I think in this case, he's sending out to have them brought to him. So that's the right hand.
The centripetal force and the centrifugal force. Yeah.
And then when the days of, he would send
and consecrate them,
which set apart or consecrated. It also says to purify them, to sanctify them. So this would be some sort of formal, sort of priestly sanctification. It would be like almost that like he's the high priest and they're being set apart. But I imagine it being, I don't know, in my mind, it's in contrast to the feasting and the celebration that was happening. And this is more of a not sober, but a somber reflection, prayer.
It's a reorientation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the feasting and everything is on a horizontal plane, and the consecration and everything is is on a vertical plane, right?
Yep.
And that's that same combination when it says blameless and upright, you know? You have this horizontal and vertical thing happening in Job, right? But then it's not only who he is, but it's also because of who he is, what he does, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. So he would offer an offering to send up to God. So that's that vertical thing again. Because the burnt offerings, you would burn something so the smoke would go up to God. And then Job says, it may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts.
I'm sorry, but what is, wait. I have a footnote.
Ooh.
For cursed, because I just wanted to say, what does cursed mean in this sense? It says the Hebrew word bless is used euphemistically for curse in 1:5, 11:2.
Yeah.
So what is this? What is
it? Actually says in Hebrew, they may have blessed God in their hearts. And then when Satan says later to God, he says, if you strike him, he will bless you to your face. But it's actually it's meaning the opposite. And I don't know enough about the Hebrew or how it's used or how they know that it's being used oppositely, but the word actually there is bless.
I had to look up euphemistically because I didn't really know what it meant. It says by means of a mild or indirect word or expression instead of one considered too harsh or blunt. So according to this footnote, curse was too harsh. So they used the word bless. But why that seems like two different, totally, I'm going to have to ask Yosef about this.
Yeah, that's a good one for Yosef.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because that happens when Satan's talking too.
And it's what Job's wife says to him further down. Curse God and die.
Yep. And then when it says God or Job did not curse God.
Yeah. Like
it says he did not bless God. So it's funny. I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah. Because my first thought was, what does this mean? Curse God and die? Because how can you curse God? You know? Like
right.
What could you say to curse God? I don't. Maybe I'm just too magnanimous.
Well, that'll be a question later on for sure. Okay. So he said that it may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. So there's nothing obvious that the kids have done wrong. His children have done wrong. So it's not like, I saw something that is a sin and now I need to do this for them. Some people, I think it's like one of those things where it goes along with the consecration thing. It's like, I wrote it down, what I was wanting. So Job acts like a priest between them and God, not because of any obvious evidence of sin, but in case sin might be in their heart. He doesn't condemn them, but is conscious of the dangers of even the smallest amount of pride. So it's not like, obviously they're corrupt. And so I've got to do this. They're corrupt in their heart. Yeah, I've got to do this. He's saying, but he's not condemning them in that way, but he is saying he is taking seriously. So he's not naive to think that, my kids are perfect and they don't need, they're not.
No, this gets to the blameless part of his personality. Right? Because his thought is for them. It has nothing to do with him. He's not doing this so that God preserves Job. He's doing this because it's a kindness to them, right? It maintains their integrity. And so this is Job's horizontal mode of being. Like, this is his blamelessness, right? Didn't you say in that definition that part of that definition in Hebrew for blameless was kind?
Gentle
And kind. Like, this is what a parent would do, right, for their children. Yep. They would keep them from any kind of danger, whether it's physical or spiritual.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I think, like, a lot of times when I hear people talk about the book of Job, they'll try to find fault with Job.
Yeah, they need to.
Yeah.
They got to explain stuff that happened to them.
and what Job's friends end up doing anyway. But we kind of have this perspective from the narrator who's telling a story that this is the perfect man, and not perfect, the most complete man. He's complete in every way.
The whole man.
He's fulfilled the idea of being a person. He's like, like there's nothing lacking in him, and he's not naive. He's not a Superman. He's not. He's honestly good in every respect, in every way. Yeah. And so when it comes to, like, I always come back to this just to be, as I went through the book of Job and gone through it, this is the facts. It's not trying to tell you, there's nothing hidden in here that's like trying to say that Job had a weakness here, or he's not a deity. He's not, I don't know. He's just human and he's done everything right. And through that, he's been completed. And
yeah.
So I guess, yeah. I don't even know if we're going to make it through. We're probably going to make it through this first part of Job 1. We'll have to continue later, but all right. So we get into, you ready to move on to heaven?
Yeah. Let's go to heaven.
Okay. So we go to the divine council. So now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. So this idea of the sons of God, from what I understand, it's kind of like the divine council. So the divine council is like the spiritual beings that God delegates the different things that are happening in the world to. So, angels are his messengers. There's different principalities and powers that work on God's behalf. And it's just a hierarchy of spiritual beings, and God is at the top, and he delegates things down through these other spiritual beings. And this is mentioned other places. It's like the Elohim, the divine council. There's a way in which God isn't necessarily doing it. He does things directly, but in other ways, like he does it through these spiritual beings, these angels, these sons of God. Okay. And then Satan also comes among them. He's one of the sons of God. Now we can go with, a more Christian interpretation, which is Satan is the evil one, the fallen angel, and somehow Satan is walking in. But then Satan here just is actually a title, and it's the title called the accuser. And It's kind of like just the one who is to bring issues up to the king. His role could even be to point out to the king things that he's doing wrong. And this is what any wise king would have, which would be someone to point out problems. And because when you're a king, no one wants to tell you what you've done wrong, because you have the power to chop off people's heads. And so it's good to have someone appointed to this position so that that could be their job and they don't have to fear anything necessarily. So the Satan means the accuser, or what is it else? The adversary.
Yeah. Sounds like a lawyer.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of like this sort of, the book of Job kind of takes on this sort of legal courtroom context. Okay. And the Lord said,
I can't remember where it is, but there's somewhere, I think it's the story of Balaam and his donkey. I don't know where that is at the moment, but I could look it up, but it's okay. But where the angel of the Lord is blocking, right, the gate, and he can't get in. And I read somewhere that the Hebrew word there is Sataning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, because he was being an adversary, because he was going to strike him down.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So the Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" I don't know what to make of that question, because God's saying, like, where did you come from?
Where were you? Where
were you?
Yeah, but I mean, doesn't Jesus say that to people too?
Yeah, and then God also says that to Adam and Eve in the garden.
At the well, he says, "Where's your husband?" And he knows the answer.
I know. Yeah, in Jung's book on Job, this drives Jung crazy. He's like, why doesn't God consult his omnipotence?
Yeah, but that, to me, that's a typical narrow response, because it's like I just said before, God's striking up a conversation. Where you been? How you doing? Like, even do we really want to know when we strike up conversations with our petty little phrases? Not saying God's petty here or anything, but he's inviting a conversation is what he's doing, and about something that he already knows is going to happen. But the conversation
and maybe
needs to be.
Maybe it's a way, like it's the divine council, the sons of God are gathered around, and maybe he asks that to all of them. He's like, where have you come from? They're like, I've come from this area, and they give their report or whatever they're doing. Like, you can imagine a king asking, where did you come from? Like, well, I come from Kansas, and then start to say what's happening in Kansas. I don't know. Okay, so Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down upon it. So it seems like Satan's saying, like, I've been everywhere. I don't know. And then there's this, yeah. And there's this also sort of sense like Satan's like, I'm not going to tell you where I've been. Kind of thing.
Sounds kind of bored to me.
Well, and it also sounds a little bit like what a predatory animal does when it's looking for, like, it's pacing. It's
I don't know. I've heard that said about this verse, going to and fro. But it's like he's looking for something to do, and he can't do it because he has to ask permission to do anything. You see, God gives him the permission to do whatever it is he's doing to Job, right? So he's like wandering around looking for something to do, so he can bring it back to the council and say, I could do that. Could I do that? Yeah, that's how it seems to me.
There's an interesting connection in the language of this going to and fro, with how that hedge is described, the hedge that is protecting Job. It's almost like that Satan has found the borders,
the boundaries,
and that's where he's walking the boundaries.
Isn't there a verse that talks about Satan as like a devouring lion or something?
Mm-hmm.
He may destroy.
Yeah.
Which is that same idea that he's out looking for something to do, right? Yep. Like he's the accuser. So he's finding fault with things. That's what he's doing, right? He's going around looking for, we all have that tendency, but we also all have someone like that in our life, right? Who's just like, please stop. And they're kind of like wandering to and fro, right?
Yeah.
They may devour.
Right.
It's the same.
And then this makes this next part even more interesting, because God says, have you considered my servant Job, that there's none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? Like, people like to characterize this interaction between God and Satan as them making some sort of bet. Like Satan brings this up to God and then God takes it on. But like God's initiating all this.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing that I had to really, when I first came across that, I was like, wait a minute, because I was under the spell of the bet. Okay.
Yeah.
Satan actually approached God and made a bet with him. Like, I bet you I could. Right. And then I remember reading that and going, wait a minute. God is the one who's like, so how have you been? Like if you could do a little cartoon of it, like, oh, he's talking to me. Where have you been? Oh, wandering around looking for things. Have you seen Job?
I know.
And he's like, I saw him. So because he is looking for something, right? He's the accuser. He's looking for some fault. And I mean, when just that little, how many verses is that one? Yeah. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth? A blameless and upright man. It's like rubbing salt in the wound. Who fears God and turns away from evil. Have you seen him? Like, what?
Of course, he's only the greatest man of the East.
What are you going to do with that? Like, if you think about that sentence and that interaction there, I think you have to just throw away a lot of your presuppositions and axioms.
Because God's pointing him out because of how good he is.
Well, God's pointing him out to the adversary.
God's pointing him out. I know. And this is like, this is the question I have, is like, what is God up to? Like what is God doing? It's fairly obvious what Satan's doing, whether from the Christian sort of, he's the fallen angel that's seeking, he's a lion going to destroy, or even from just the title being the accuser and the one that's going to find out faults in the creation. Like it's obvious what Satan's up to and what he wants to do. And it's unclear what God's doing.
Well, I can guarantee you that nobody's going to like what God is doing, what's obvious, what God, what you're reading there.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also I would also say that one must be careful not to put intents in God's heart in this, but just read the text for what it says, and then go from there.
Yeah.
That's
I would like to just put a big question mark right here rather than try to establish anything.
Or just let it be. Right?
Let it be.
Just let it be. Sure. But don't try to make it fit into your idea of what kind of God should do, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think if you start there with just letting things be as they are, like I said in the beginning, right? Seeing things how they really are. Just do that with that verse, and then let the rest of the story unfold. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's where it has to start.
Yep. All right. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all he has, and he will curse you to your face. So I think the accusation is pretty straightforward, is that Job is blameless, upright, fears God, and turns away from evil because it benefits him. Job is a pragmatic, honest guy who, you could even say he sees things as they are, and it's better to just be on your good side because otherwise he would just curse you. Like that's why he's those things, is just because you protect him. So, and then I think it's even, a deeper accusation. It's like men, if Job is a representative for men, like humanity isn't good. They're using you. It's all just for their benefit.
Well, what he's saying essentially is this, I think. He's saying they're weak. They're weak, right? Take everything away from them that makes their life easy, and they'll just help their hands. They'll curse you, their creator.
Yep.
And I think it's really important to think about this in terms of humanity. This is the story of a man, but this is also the story of humanity, right? Like that part that we talked about at the beginning with the 7,000 sheep, the 3,000 camels and all that. That's a country, right? That's a nation.
Yep.
That's the globe.
Yep.
Right? That's civilization. That's
mankind.
It's mankind. It's what he does on the earth. He trades. He does all these.
He farms.
He has a textile industry. He farms. He eats meat. He has children. Right.
Yep.
And so. I think I lost my train of thought. Shoot.
Well, Job is just a representative of all mankind. He's engaged in all manner of activity that men do that make humanity great.
I guess what I was trying to say was, like, if you keep in mind that Satan here is talking about humanity, right? And that he's essentially saying that they're weak. They're only strong, right, in their faith, or in their uprightness, or in their blamelessness. They're only strong because they have everything that enables them to be strong, right? But if you take away all those enabling things, then they'll just be weak, because they essentially aren't strong. They're weak. That's what Satan is seeing. Okay, he sees them as weak and incapable of standing up as I mean, imagine, like, he's an angel. He's walking around with a bunch of other pretty high-ranking officials, right, in his divine council. And they're looking at this creation, made out of clay, right? This thing that seems to be all happy-go-lucky, but then they disobey. They do. So they're weak, right? There's a weakness there, and God says, "All right, have at her."
Yep.
And I mean, to me, this is the most interesting thing, because in the New Testament, it says that God's strength is made perfect in weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And like if you think about, like you said, that a lot of people see this as a bet, right? I don't see it that way. I remember thinking, how can I think about this other than that God's betting, because he's hoping. God's like, okay, Satan, right? Like I don't think God doesn't bet. Okay, God knows. And so I'm like, what is it that God knows? Well, he knows that his strength is made perfect in weakness. That's what he knows, right? And so there's a process. And I think that we know this, that when people are tried, and we call it trial for a reason, because it makes us stronger, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, doesn't Shania Twain have a song like that? Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, or something.
Right. Right.
Like we know this, right?
Yep.
And so this process of trial is where God's strength is made perfect in weakness. And what is the weakness? Humanity.
Mm-hmm.
They're the weakness. And that's what Satan sees. He's like, no, not those. They're not angelic. They can't go wherever they want. They're not beings of light. They don't get to commune with you in the divine council of the heavens. They're crawling around in the dirt, right? They don't know anything. They're naive. They're stupid. They're weak. They're like earthworms in a way, to him.
Yeah. There's a way in which Satan is kind of disgusted by humanity.
It seems like it.
Yeah. And there's even an accusation of like, they only see the blessings. They only see the way you protect them. If that goes away, they can't see you.
Well, here's the story.
They'll curse you to your face, and
right.
Face is a surface. Like, they won't see past that.
Right. There's no depth to it.
Yeah.
I had a friend, he raised Tennessee Walkers. I bought some of my first horses from him, actually. He was a phenomenal natural horseman trainer. And he could, he would ride his stallion bareback and without any reins or anything. And he could actually ride it. He could go where he wanted to go, and the horse would move wherever he wanted to go, as if it had reins. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then, he would ride this stallion into the horse trailer bareback, and then grab the top of the horse trailer as the horse was going in, and lift himself off, and then drop to the ground and close the door.
Yeah.
Like this is how good he was. Okay. But these horses were, for him, they were objectified. They were objects. They were manipulable. Okay. Malleable techniques. And he bought and sold horses that was his living. Okay. He bred Tennessee. He had 70 of them. He had a huge ranch. And I spent quite a bit of time riding with him. And I said something to him about the relationship that I was experiencing with my horses. And he said, you're just a facilitator for them. You're just a facilitator.
Yeah.
Right? You do things for them, and then they come to you. That's all. Yep. That's it. That's essentially what Satan's saying here to God. Okay. And I was like God, I was like, really? Because they come to me when I do nothing for them.
Right.
So, yeah, the little parallel story there.
No, that's great. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Okay. So now Job or Satan takes, let me get on the right. Okay. So Satan is going to strike Job.
Job's property and children.
Yeah. And in verse 13, it's like there's a day when Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the oldest brother's house. So this is at the oldest brother's birthday. And the birthday is this creation celebration, and it's the oldest brother. So this is the most important birthday if we're going to rank birthdays.
Right. The oldest son. Yeah.
So this is like the celebration of celebrations. And a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding beside him. So the oxen are plowing. That means it's springtime. They're planting. I'm assuming, I mean, there's sometimes they plant stuff in the fall, but a lot of stuff gets planted in the spring, early spring. So it's like a new year has started. Not only is it the birthday of the older son, it's the new agricultural year.
Yeah.
And this is like the beginning of a new cycle of time, let's say. And it was supposed to be another good one. But then the Sabians swooped in and on them and took away the animals. So the Sabians, from what I gathered, they're just an Arab tribal group. And they just basically, and then they killed all the
people.
Huh?
And they just swoop down on people.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then they stole all the animals and then killed all the people.
Yeah.
The messenger barely makes it to a way to report. And that's how it happens with all four of these incidents is the messenger barely makes it away. Like there's only one person that survives, and it's the person that goes and tells Job.
Yeah. The other thing that I found hard, like when I read this, it says that while he was yet speaking, another came and said, and while he was yet speaking, and and you can feel the intensity of it when you read that all at once. And you just have this man sitting there taking this all in. First it's his food, right? Or the food for his people, his community.
This is going to be a famine.
Yeah. And then it's his sheep. That's his textile industry and meat, right? And then it's his trading business,
Yep.
And then it's his whole family. So it just goes and it's more than a domino effect, because while one is yet speaking, the other one arrives, right? So there's not even a break. There's not even a break in between the bad news.
No, not at all.
There's no moment for Job to actually just absorb the first thing he heard,
No, and it keeps getting worse.
Yeah. Super intense.
Yeah, and it emphasizes the way in which this would have been taken, which is that this is an act of God. This isn't just some accident. Like people at the time, like if something bad happened, they didn't immediately just go like, oh no, you're cursed. It's just like, okay, this thing happened, let's take care of it. But all of this to happen at once, it's clearly something divine is happening here. This is not.
Let's call it supernatural, right?
Yeah.
Like, because from Job's response, like his response is, just think about that intensity for a minute. And he gets up and he tears his clothes. He falls on the ground and worships. And he says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Like, it's like unbelievable to me that he that he wouldn't just rip his hair out and jump off a cliff.
Right.
You know? Like, it's crazy that he would have such a perfect response.
Well, it strikes me that like the tearing of the robe and shaving the head, that's a typical way to mourn. So he immediately goes into the practice of mourning. And then this falling to the ground and worshiping God, like, I think it's, we've talked about the awe of God before,
Mm-hmm.
but this is that awe of God. The authentic, when something terrible happens and you collapse and you start to weep, like, I think that I would say that's a type of, that's worship.
It's utter helplessness is what it is, right? And yet directing that helplessness to something that it transcends you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like, that feeling, the feeling of helplessness,
mm-hmm.
is it's not a nihilistic kind of helplessness. Mm-hmm. It's a making yourself small, mm-hmm. before something that is so much greater than you, right? Mm-hmm. And in this case, everything that just happened is also that much greater than him, right? Like, the whole thing, everything is greater than he is. He's
completely overwhelmed.
He's just this small man on the ground with his face on the ground.
Yeah, and the day before, he was the greatest man of the East.
Yeah.
And then with him saying, naked, without possessions, I came into this world from my mother's womb, and naked I return. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Like, you can tell that this is something he's meditated on and that he's contemplated. I think it seems like, I've heard people say that it sounds distant and kind of rehearsed, but I prefer to, like, think of Job as a man that's more like, it may be like maybe those sayings were common at the time, but I prefer to think that Job deep in his heart felt these things and said them out of his heart, instead of, I don't like to think that Job was trying to remain pious.
I don't think he could if it didn't come from his heart.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about the best man here, the best of all men.
Well, and not only that, but in the worst of all places right now, right? So, like, even the best of us probably wouldn't have that response. Like, this is, to me, this response is like, it's almost like a miracle.
Yeah.
It's almost like a miracle. And the other thing that I would say is, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken. The first thing he says is the Lord gave. So nothing that he owned was his.
Yeah, he considered
it was a gift from God. And I know from my own personal experience, when you perceive the world that way, then when it's taken away, it isn't, the gift comes, it's also a gift in a sense, right? That's why you can say, blessed be the name of the Lord, because everything comes from God and it's always a gift. That's what Jesus says, isn't that? Jesus that says that?
I'm sure.
Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above. Maybe that's Paul.
Yeah, or a song.
But when this is, I've mentioned this before. stressed the importance of seeing everything as a gift. And I mean everything, even the most difficult things, right? And I think that's why he can say, blessed be the name of the Lord, because he's fully at, I don't want to say the mercy, but he's fully at, his existence relies on God. That's what he's saying.
He's dependent. Right? Yep.
Like, if it wasn't for God, I would have nothing to begin with, to be taken away, right?
Yeah, and I don't think he's realizing this right now. I think he's contemplated this before in his life. This is something that he's thought about, and then as the moment comes, this kind of wells up out of him. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like he has contemplated it in that he knows that everything comes from God, right? Everything is a gift. So that his life, living a life like that you perceive everything as a gift, then you're, in a sense, you're already prepared for this. Mm-hmm. You're already prepared, right? I mean, that would also make sense as to why he prays and consecrates and sacrifices for his children afterwards, right? Because he feels a compulsion to look after the thing that God has given him.
Right. I think that's right.
Yeah.
So I got a couple notes on going back to the disaster, things that I just found interesting. So the fire of God fell and burned up the sheep and servants. So that would have been lightning. And it could have been like, I don't know, like how does lightning kill that many sheep? Like that's 7,000 sheep.
It can. It's actually, if you Google it, it's not an unusual occurrence for livestock to be killed in large amounts by lightning.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I would think like maybe 10 could be killed at a time.
Yeah, because lightning actually goes from the bottom up. Okay, doesn't strike. Mm-hmm. It comes from the ground up. It just looks like it strikes. And I think that's right anyway. I'm not a scientist, but.
Well, I think sometimes it's one or the other.
Oh, okay. But anyway, in her case, in her horse's case, well, her horse got struck by lightning anyway.
Yeah.
She explained to me that the lightning traveled from the ground up, right?
Right.
And went through the horse and killed it instantly. Like it didn't suffer for a moment.
Right.
And there are a number of like even modern day stories of sheep. I don't know about cattle, maybe cattle.
And I guess if they're all close together, maybe it's raining also or something, and there's water.
Yeah, I'm curious now.
Okay, while you're looking that up. So the Chaldeans, like it says they formed 3 parties to capture the camels and to kill the servants. So this was like an organized raid. Again, it says the servants were killed by the edge of the sword. Same with the other. And then it's interesting because of the 4 disasters, there's 2 that are like these tribal attacks, and then 2 of them are these natural, the whirlwind and the lightning. And there's sort of, if it was all 4, tribal attacks, maybe they would have coordinated or whatever. But this is like tribal attacks plus natural disaster, because the 4th one is the wind that comes and strikes the house, but it says it strikes the 4 corners of the house, which makes me think it's a whirlwind,
hurricane, or like a tornado.
Yeah, but I've never heard anyone talk about this before, but God shows up at the end in a whirlwind.
Mm-hmm.
So the whirlwind strikes the house and then it falls and everyone dies.
Okay, so back to the sheep.
Yeah.
Just on the search page, there's an article, 500 sheep killed in lightning strike in Georgia. Lightning kills 500 sheep in Western Nepal. A number of sheep were killed in Donegal, Ireland. Lightning strike. 70 sheep perished in a lightning strike in Turkey. 173 sheep killed by lightning in China. So,
wow.
Yeah.
But still, like that, he has 7,000 sheep. So still, it's like a...
Well, it's pretty a big deal.
That's serious.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder, just out of curiosity, I wonder if those kinds, like when it kills sheep, if it's the kind of lightning that comes from the ground up, and it just, it's just everywhere in the ground, right? And then just travels up through everything at once, something like that. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a scientist.
So that ends chapter 1 with in verse 22, it says, through all this, Job did not sin. And then the Amplified Bible says, or blame God. Okay, so then into chapter 2, we have basically like word for word the account of God and Satan again.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sons of God present themselves. Satan was also there. God asks, where have you been? Where have you come from? Satan says, going to and fro in the earth, walking up and down upon it. And this always touches me. Verse 3. So like all this has happened to Job. And then God says to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? And he says the same exact thing as he said before, that there is none like him on the earth. A blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. And so like God wasn't looking at all the stuff he had and all the blessings he had. He was looking at the man. Mm-hmm. And he says the exact same thing. And then he adds, well, I just think that says something about Job, and it says something about what God sees and what God's kind of doing. Mm-hmm.
But I would add that he sees that because of the way Job carries himself, even with, like, what's that saying? Power corrupts, and I don't know. I can't remember.
Absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
Right. So having everything can also be a destructive force in your life, right?
Right.
And he had everything. And he was still a blameless and upright man, in the beginning. And then everything is taken away, and that it doesn't change. So this is who Job is. This is Job to his core.
Yep. Sorry, I have to unlock video games for my kids. I have them all locked down, and
you got the power?
My phone is blowing up because I'm like,
you got the power, Jess?
I do.
Absolute power corrupts us.
Oh no! Right now, I'm controlling the electronics at my household.
Okay.
All right, that's all. Okay, and then at the end of that, God adds, he still holds fast to his integrity, although you enticed me against him to destroy him without reason. So God, the accusation is that Job would curse God.
Yeah.
And God doesn't say anything about that I guess, directly. So he says he holds fast his integrity.
He still holds fast his integrity.
Right.
So,
So he's maintaining his integrity.
even though you incited me against him to destroy him without reason. Without reason.
And incited me. Like God's taking responsibility for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God sent out Satan to do the destruction, but God's not like, what did you do?
No.
He's like, you incited me against him.
Yeah.
And without reason. There's no reason for it.
Although God pointed out Job.
Well, yeah, it's like, what are you doing, God? Pointing Job out.
Just leave that. Let it be. There's something about integrity that I really like in this story, because there's a purity to integrity, right? Like when I hear the word integer, I think of something that is without spot or blemish. That's how I think of it.
Right.
There's no taint in something that is integer, right? That is to me the core of Job. That's what it enables him to be a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away, who stands in awe of God and turns away from evil. Mm-hmm. Because he knows that everything comes from above, right? Everything is a gift. And that cultivates humility in Job. Mm-hmm. And in turn makes him a man of integrity.
Yep.
He can't claim what's the word I'm looking for? That anything he has is because of who him. He didn't, it's a gift. Mm-hmm. Right? It's just a gift. And he's a steward of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the beginning of humility right there.
Mm-hmm. So then Satan says, skin for skin, all that a man has, he will give for his life. That skin for skin, from what I've read, no one knows what that means. It's like a translation of it. No one knows what, you can kind of, I guess what it means. But then Satan says, strike his body and he'll curse you to your face. And then the Lord says, behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life. So before God said, don't touch him. And now Satan says, well, you didn't let me strike him. He'll do it if I strike him. And then God's like, okay. And then Satan goes out from the presence. Job has loathsome sores from his head to his foot. And then he takes a broken piece of pottery and scrapes himself while he sits in the ashes. And then his wife says to him, do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die. This seems to me, isn't this like a temptation? This is like Eve giving the apple to Adam.
I don't know.
But then he's being tempted by his wife.
There's no naivety in this wife.
No, you can empathize with her.
Like she's asking Job to do something that could, possibly bring down even more tragedy on their heads, right? To curse God. Unless, of course, she doesn't, unless she believes in another God. Who knows what kind of wife he's married to, maybe she doesn't like his God, prefers her own God, like that's a thing in the Old Testament, right?
Right.
Yeah. I think she just really ticked. She's pretty ticked.
Well, because, if you're serving a God and then they don't hold up their end of the bargain like you do,
Yeah.
you
And
do everything you're supposed to, and then they don't hold up their end of it, then you curse them.
Mm-hmm.
You toss them in the...
Yeah, but there's a fear attached to that. Like, I'm just reminded of my conversation with that lady in India when I said to her that God wanted her for himself, and and she said, yeah, but I can't. I have to go to the temple. I have to sacrifice or else, right? So there's a fear in just cursing your God. Like, like for her to say that, I think she's ready to die too, you know, like she's just ready to die. She's just like, just get it over with. Let's just get ourselves killed by our God.
Right.
Yeah. And then again, he says, shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil?
Mm-hmm.
The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. That's the same sentence.
Yep.
Right? So, and that, I don't know how to, like that, to me, that knowing that Job can say that in the situation that he's in, which is proof positive for me that he means what he's saying. Okay.
Yeah.
You have to really be a man of integrity. Like, like I've always had this suspicion that the reason that God and Satan, did this thing wasn't because God wasn't making a bet with Satan. God just knew that there's no way that Job, he can't lie. And to say anything other than the things that we've heard him say so far, he would have to lie to himself, right? And he can't. He actually knows this, what he's saying. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? He knows that. He knows it through and through. Otherwise, he'd say, I don't know, we got all this good stuff from God. Now what the heck? Right? But he doesn't say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me it's the, for his wife to say this to him, it's the highest level of being tempted to curse God. And it's totally understandable why you'd want to. And
yeah, well, like I say, I seriously believe that she wants to be killed.
Oh yeah.
If she says, she knows that if he was to curse God, that some lightning bolt would strike both of them and they'd be dead, right? And that's all she wants. Yeah. She doesn't want to, like Job talks about not being born, right? And that's different though than wanting to be killed. Not being born and wanting to be killed are two different things, in my opinion. But we'll get there.
Yeah, we will get in there.
Yeah, and but let me just tell a little story, because when my husband collapsed, and and he basically died in front of me, and I knew he was gone, I just kept screaming, "Not now," to God, right? And I wasn't angry. I was begging for his life back, right? And it was for me. Literally, it was for me, because I didn't think I could take it. And I knew, like Job, that was a gift. But I didn't want to be tested that way. I didn't want that gift. I knew it was, I'm going to cry, but I just knew that it was going to be too much.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, and it says something for Job to be able to go through that and then for him to maintain his integrity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, he did tear his clothes. He did shave his head, and he's sitting in the ashes.
Someone said to me during that time when my husband was in hospital and I was recovering from the trauma of the whole thing, someone said to me, well, it's such a blessing that he's still alive. And I said, yeah, but it would be a blessing if he had died too. And that's something I need to remember.
Right. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away.
Yeah.
And there's something about what Job goes through here. If you suffer, in the Bible study I was going through, one of the guys in there was like, if you've ever suffered anything, you didn't suffer as much as Job. Like, so you can look at Job and be like, I've suffered, but I haven't suffered as much as him. He's like suffered everything someone could suffer. Down to, even to the details of his wife sort of
wanting
going against it. Yeah.
Die. Yeah.
Yeah.
Be killed by God.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not even like she's not even being like manipulative or
no, she's done.
Evil necessarily. She is heartbroken.
She's suicidal.
Right.
Really. She is. And this is her means of ending her life.
Yep.
Curse God and die. Right?
So, yeah, there's a way in which I think we're supposed to be able to, if you've ever suffered anything in your life, you can empathize with Job, and you can sort of marvel at the way he reacts here.
Absolutely. You have to. If you just think about it for a minute.
Huh?
If you just think about it for a minute, you have to marvel. Yeah. And
so often, like, in order to make sense of the book, people like to denigrate Job in some way or another. And man, I just don't see how you can do it. They wouldn't make him a little bit less or give him some sort of problem or throw something like original sin into it. Be like, and there's no sign of any of that. It's all projected into there.
Even God says.
I know. He says, like, it's said 3 times, twice by God, and then once by the narrator, that he's blameless and upright. And
that is blameless, the horizontal, and upright, the vertical, right? So all of his relationships are in order, all of them. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't say that for myself.
No. And so why would anyone say that about Job? That, like, I see a fault in Job.
Yeah.
Technically.
Maybe it makes them feel better about themselves. That's what I think.
Because people are trying to make sense of this book and they don't know what to do with it. So I think that's an easy way out for people.
Well, I mean, Jess, if you think about it, if the worst things could happen to the best man, what could happen to you?
I know. Oh my gosh.
It's terrifying.
Okay, so Job's 3 friends hear of this, and his friends are men like himself, wise, not wise men of wisdom and reputation and stature in their own way, and they have to travel there. They're not in the immediate area that Job's in. So it's Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. Yeah, and this part always gets me because they see him from a distance and they don't recognize him.
Mm.
And then they weep together.
Yeah.
They tear their robes. They sprinkle dust on their heads. Then they...
And is this Shiva?
Sitting Shiva, yeah. This is where they act. This is actually the source of it, I think. The 7 days of silence.
7 days and 7 nights.
Yep. And no one spoke a word because they saw his suffering was very great.
Yeah.
So these are good friends.
Yeah.
And it, I think it's important to kind of set that in our minds right away, because the book takes such a turn. these friends don't end up being good friends, but you can tell at the beginning here they set out with, these are also good men.
Yeah.
Whether so and we kind of get like as they speak in the following chapters, we kind of get a little bit of their personality and kind of who they are. Each one kind of has his own kind of themes but as for now, they're just with their friend Job, and they're called Job's friends. Like, they're not called his, now the 3 wise men came from the east. They're called friends. So I think there's something to that too, that it's almost like the best of all men is, had the worst of all things happen to him. And then his good friends have now come to him, and
they say to show sympathy and comfort him.
Yep.
Yeah. Which is what one does when, a friend loses a loved one or everything.
Yeah.
Usually it's one loved one. If it's really bad, it's more than one. But to have lost all of your children, all of your servants, all of your livestock, all of your income, all of everything.
Everything.
I'm just curious, do you have any idea what the Hebrew word is for friend there? I'm wondering.
I can look it up real quick.
Because there's so many versions of.
Here's one thing, like, especially in the prologue and the epilogue, well, throughout Job, but there's all these words in there that the Hebrew words are like only there in Job. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, so they're kind of related to other Hebrew words, so you can kind of but the word is, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Rie, and then it's related to, I don't even want to pronounce these things because Jacob will probably, if Jacob ever sees this, he'll just make fun of me. But it's related to other words that also means friends, neighbor, translated. Yeah.
Okay, so it is definitely like
companion, fellow.
Yeah, not an acquaintance, but someone close.
Yeah, someone. Yeah, close.
Okay.
And just judging their reaction, that they weep and they,
Yeah.
and that they would have recognized him before and now they don't recognize him like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So that ends Job chapter 2.